And welcome into another edition of the Hustle Show podcast for this Hustle Show on Wednesday, November 29th. I'm Mark Zinno, joined as always by Adam Trigger. Appreciate you guys joining us here, Trig. It's great to be with you as always on Wednesday. And just a quick programming note for the folks watching every week. I know we typically do Survivor stuff. If you're still in your Survivor pool at this point in time, good luck. Hope you get there the rest of the way. But with everybody, likely most of us being out of it at this point in time. Hey, look, if you want a good Survivor pick, just hit us up on Twitter at TopFlightSI, at Mark Zinno, and we'll give you guys our thoughts that way. But we're going to divert from that with some new NFL news here that just broke today. Aaron Rodgers is now officially designated to return off IR, so he has a 4-week window where any point in time he can come back and play. So he's going to begin practicing with the team. Now, look, the Jets are in a very tough spot right now. They're 4-7. They are likely not able to win the division, although still mathematically alive. So, the idea that this team could make the playoffs is something interesting and worth noting here. Trig, we're seeing the Jets right now at 18-1 to make the postseason. One of the longer odds of teams in a very crowded AFC when you look at it. I mean, the Jets right now, from a standing standpoint, if you actually the playoffs were to begin today, the Jets would only be above the Patriots in the AFC. That's how low on the totem pole they are. They're in 15th place technically, although they're tied at 4-7 with the Titans and the Chargers, half game behind the Raiders, full game behind the Bengals. You do all the math from there. So we still have some buys to get through this week and everything. But, I mean, what would you think of the Jets and their chances to make the playoffs if they get a win this week against the Jets? And now we know the possibility that Aaron Rodgers could return.
I still don't see it, Mark. I think it'd be, because think about it. Yes, you have a couple home games. That's nice.
Yep.
But there's still, the Falcons, they played better last week. And I don't think Ritter is as much of a liability maybe this time around as he was early in the season. The Texans are playing great. So it's then think about, are they going to win at Miami? Probably not. At Cleveland, I just think the schedule doesn't line up for them enough.
The Broncos and Bills and the Texans are sort of playing a de facto elimination game. That game's going to lose the head-to-head tiebreaker, and I think that might be sort of an elimination game. How much do you trust the Raiders and the Chargers? Not much. The Titans and the Colts, the Bills may be their biggest problem, and they don't play them again as far as catching somebody in the 7th seed. Remember, top 7 teams now make the playoffs in the NFL. It's a long shot. There's no doubt about it, but it's certainly worth an interesting discussion on the idea that the Jets, if Aaron Rodgers comes back, could make the postseason. All right, from the NFL, let's pivot to the hardwood in college tonight. A huge matchup in the top 20 between Tennessee and North Carolina from the Dean Dome in Chapel Hill. Interesting because both of these teams have had a little bit of a layoff from the Thanksgiving break. Tennessee's been off for a week now, and North Carolina's been off for 5 days. So it's that rest versus rust component here, Trig. This is interesting. Tennessee, top defensive team in the country. They're number 1 in defensive adjusted efficiency. They're top 20 in scoring defense. And I think this is a team that, is going to rule the roost here in this game. I think their defense wins out. North Carolina hasn't really played anybody, Trig. They had 4 cupcakes. They lost to Villanova in overtime, and they just beat Arkansas in a game where they scored 87 and it looked great, but they got 35 free throws, and they shot 43% from three-point range. I don't know that happens against the best defense in the country.
Yeah, that's a Villanova team that lost to Penn. I'm not that high on Villanova this year, so I don't even, the fact that they lost that game is more of a detriment to me, in my opinion. Here's for Tennessee, the viewers don't need us to tell them how good Tennessee is defensively. If you watch college basketball in any capacity, you know that this team is one of the top defensive teams in the country. They're a top 10 team. So what I want to talk about is where I think where the improvement's going to come from and why I think that they're so undervalued coming into this game. Their offensive numbers are really bad, right? Their offensive efficiency metrics are surprisingly poor, but look who they've played. Kansas, Purdue, even Syracuse in the first half out in Maui was really scrappy. Remember, that was an early tip. It was the first day of the Maui. Cuse played 30 really good minutes and really 32 really good minutes and then 8 really bad minutes. But Tennessee, what you saw in that, you saw what their defense can do in the course of a game in that game to go out and win a game that was essentially close the whole way by 17. They really can wipe you out for a stretch. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen with North Carolina at some point in this game. The thing with North Carolina, like another thing that's well known, last year was a complete disaster. They didn't make the NCAA tournament. The season was a total nightmare for them. And now this year it's a very new team, but that's the thing. Like I'm not sure. I need to see Hubert Davis actually build a team. Emphasis on the word team, because you need to be on the same page and you need to be a legitimately good basketball team to score on Tennessee and to beat Tennessee. And what I see with North Carolina are, like they'll have lapses, they'll have lulls where they don't score much. They'll have a half like they did against Northern Iowa where they go into the breakdown 6. And if you do that against Tennessee, you're going to go like 6 minutes without scoring. And in a game like this, you can't survive that, in my opinion. Like you can't survive a 7-minute scoring drought or like, a stretch where suddenly you're not running great offense and now all of a sudden Tennessee's up 10. Just ask Syracuse. They grinded for 35 minutes and Tennessee put them out by 17. So it's certainly something that Tennessee is going to do to teams. And you know what? As good as North Carolina could be this season, or even as good as they are right now, they're not Purdue and they're not Kansas. So I'm willing to throw the Maui out a little bit. Mark, I talk about this all the time. I don't love these multi-team events as real sort of. I'd rather go back to my postseason or my preseason ratings of these teams as a true barometer right now in November, more so than a 3-day vacation out on an island where you're also playing basketball. Because I was just at one in the Bahamas, Mark. That's basically what it is. It's a team building event, vacation, that also you want to play some ball and get some reps in. That's really what they are in a lot of cases. And so I'm just not going to put a ton of stock into those Maui results. I'm going to revert back to more where I have these teams coming into the season. And Tennessee is one of 5 teams I picked, maybe 5 preseason that I really legitimately think could be a national champion this year. I think the offensive numbers continue to improve because I think you're buying them at an offensive sort of floor right now. I think they're only going to go up from here. And then the defense, you already talked about it, elite, they're tough, they're physical, they're tougher, and they're more physical than North Carolina. And I think they're going to grind their way to a win tonight.
Yeah, and again, I think the other component of this, Trigger, I don't disagree with what you said about the preseason tournaments, but, when you talk about being battle-tested here, the Vols have faced Wisconsin, Syracuse, Purdue, and Kansas. As far as I remember, I think all 4 of those teams were tournament teams last year, and they're really, really good Power 5 teams. To this point, North Carolina, their non-conference schedule was Radford, Lee, Riverside, Northern Iowa. Now, Northern Iowa is not a bad program, but point simply being, the battle-testedness of Tennessee here also sells me. And, oh, by the way, in those 4 games, Tennessee held all those 4 teams to 71 or less. That ought to tell you how good their defense is here. And I don't think that North Carolina is going to be able to get to 70 tonight in this matchup. If by chance, if they can hit threes at the rate that they did against Arkansas, sure, they're going to have a shot. But this is a Tennessee team that holds opponents to 26.7% from beyond the arc, one of the best 3-point perimeter defenses in all the country here. So, I think this is going to be a very fun game to watch. I certainly am a Volunteers backer tonight, but I think that there's a lot of, good reasons here to think that Tennessee is the right side. Any other thoughts here before we move on to the NFL slate?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to the Tennessee pick, which is a 4% play for me tonight in college basketball. You nailed it when you said like the point that you made about, like I'll let North Carolina beat me here for 40 minutes. If North Carolina can beat me with Tennessee for 40 minutes and win this game by more than a basket, I'll tip my cap and I'll move on. I think that's what makes this a really good bet. I make Tennessee the favorite. You're getting a bucket. It's good enough for me to go in with a client play. And that's just all I wanted to add, for that game.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the NFL here as we look at this Week 13 schedule. Trig, there are 2 games to me that I looked at that jumped off the board at me as far as I think an overreaction line, right? Sometimes we see week to week in the NFL what happens and that we get some overreactions here. And the first game I want to point out is the Lions and Saints. Now, the Lions were installed as a 4.5-point favorite here in this game against the Saints team that just lost to the Atlanta Falcons and couldn't score a touchdown in the game. Detroit lost on Thanksgiving on a national TV audience in their most important Thanksgiving game, probably in 40 years, and the biggest game of their season, if you ask me. I know they played the Chiefs in the opener, but nobody was really expecting the Lions to come out on top there, even though they lose the game outright. They were a 6.5 or 7 point underdog in this thing. They were a 7.5 point favorite against a division rival at home on Thanksgiving. So they lay a stinker there. They didn't even play well. I think it's a gross overreaction. My numbers make this line 6.5, if not 7, in favor of the Lions here. This is a Saints team right now that is bad. They're bad on offense. They can't score. Derek Carr has been bad, and I've defended Derek Carr for years as a good quarterback. Not anymore. Can't do it because his play in New Orleans is stunk. Dennis Allen is a guy that's coaching for his head job at this point in time. I don't even know that the Saints are legitimately have a chance to win the NFC South unless the Falcons really fall apart here in the next couple of games. They're playing the Jets this week, so they have a chance to take sole possession of first place with a game in hand over the Saints. I think the Lions are flat out better. I think Dan Campbell comes in very well coached this week. There's a lot more focus. That was a loss that reminded them, hey, don't read our press clippings just yet. Don't pat ourselves on the back. We're not that good. We got to go out and play a team and go beat a team. And the fact that the game's indoor on the road helps the Lions passing game. There's no weather elements to think about. And I know the Saints defense is good, but statistically it's not as good this year as it was last year. I think it's a gross overreaction line here. I love the Lions minus 4.5 this week.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mark. They get a long week to prepare. Obviously coming off of the Thanksgiving Day loss and whatnot. Like it should be a spot where they, really take like come in with a lot of focus, take that loss, and I think Campbell's like the kind of guy that will get them motivated off of like losing a game like that. The other thing I want to point out in this game, Saints have their receivers are banged up. You already mentioned Carr, being you really need to beat the Lions through the air. Like the passing game is where they typically struggle. They're really pretty solid against the run.
They have a very good run defense.
Great run defense. I believe it's top 10 by the numbers. And Carr he just lets me down. Like every time I need Derek Carr, he just and I've been a guy that's defended him over the years. So yeah, you know what? I'll go against Derek Carr with banged up receivers. And I've said this since the beginning of the season. The Lions are an elite team. Like this is a team that could end up in the Super Bowl. There's not many of them in football this year that I truly believe can end up in a Super Bowl. The Lions are a team that could potentially end up in the Super Bowl. I still believe that, even with an ugly loss to Green Bay on Thanksgiving. I'm with you here, Mark. It does feel like a spot where they bounce back, and if they do, they probably cover the number.
All right, another game that kind of has a stinky line to me in a good way. You look at Cleveland and the LA Rams here, and this is definitely a hold your nose and you look away kind of game. But Trig, simply this, okay? I get Cleveland's quarterback situation is bad. PJ Walker is bad. DTR is bad. Neither of these guys are really NFL quarterbacks. The Rams were initially a 1.5 point dog to the Cardinals last week before the line flipped, and they ended up closing like at 2.5 point favorites. I don't know where anybody gets off laying 4.5 with the Rams. The Rams shouldn't be laying 4.5 to anybody in this league other than the Carolina Panthers. I get the fact that, it's Matt Stafford and the Rams are home, which isn't really a home field advantage. I just think this is a massive overreaction. Like, look at the Rams and the numbers that they've been getting and when they've been a favorite. Now, all of a sudden, they're a 4.5 point. And some of this has come down a little bit. I think there are only 3.5s out there now. So the market is responding to an overreaction here. But this is still the best defense in the league. And again, I know Cleveland, their offense is, but I don't know that the Rams should be laying more than a field goal to the best defense in the NFL. Like that alone to me reeks of something that doesn't make sense here. And I know Cleveland offense is just, I keep saying it, how bad it is, Trig, but guess what? I'd still back the Browns here and take the points because if anything, I think the Rams only win this thing by a field goal.
Well, Mark, it's the same question that you pretty much have to ask yourself. It's the same handicap with the Browns that is every single week, right?
That's week 5.
Can they win? Can they win in spite of the quarterback situation? And the answer is normally yes. They're 7-4 this year. They've won game. I mean, Deshaun Watson, when he was in there, was rarely good and rarely healthy. Like before he was hurt, he was still hurt. He was still banged up, and he wasn't, and then you go back to early in the season, the game against Pittsburgh, which I think if I remember correctly, he literally threw it away like at the very end. And then, the loss to Baltimore in week 4, which was, I think, the first time we saw DTR step on the field, and they were just not ready with the quarterback situation that week. The Browns have mostly been good in spite of the quarterback situation. So what does that mean? It means you're almost always getting value with the Browns. Since the bye week, they beat San Francisco. Walker was the quarterback. They come back and win against Indianapolis. Walker came into the game for Deshaun getting hurt. And then, you go down the list. Beat Arizona, the comeback win over Baltimore, the win over Pittsburgh, almost always in spite of the quarterback situation. So, yeah, it would be Browns or pass for me here.
Yeah, again, it's more of a fate of the Rams being that much better than any team, like 4.5 points better than any team, Trig. That's kind of just what stands out to me. Because again, when you look at, and if you just want to do the old adage at it, like from a neutral site, kind of deal, like where the Rams are right now. I mean, are the Rams a 4.5 point favorite over the Buccaneers? Probably no. Are they a 4.5 point favorite over the Commanders? I don't think so. It's just hard for me to envision them a 4.5 point favorite over anybody. They might be a favorite, but it'll be shorter than a field goal or a field goal at most here. And with a key number of 3, and even if you could find a 4 out there, still take the Browns at 4 in case you get a 21-17 or a 14-10 kind of final, whatever it may be. But still, to me, it's more of a fate of the Rams and an absolute letdown spot after they mollywopped the Cardinals last week. So that's where I come from with that. Any other games on the NFL slate you got your eyes on?
Yeah, I want to talk about one, and this may actually inadvertently help you with Survivor. So, the reason we're not talking about Survivor at this point for 2 reasons. One, most people are out. 2, I really do believe that from this point forward till the end, the way you play Survivor is you use your best bet that's a favorite, right? So the best bet you have for the week that's also a favorite is probably the team you target in Survivor, unless you find yourself with one of those late situations where you've got like a 10-point favorite. And then you can just be like, okay, I'm going to roll with a double-digit favorite on the money line. I'm going to talk about a game that I think a lot of people might use incorrectly. And I think people may use the Bucs this week, and I don't agree with doing so, because I don't think the Panthers are that bad, as bad as everyone has made them out to be, as bad as they've looked at times this year. And B, it's the old Mark. It's the coach just got fired, and teams, teams rally in that spot, and teams that have struggled tend to rally in that spot often. I feel like bad teams. I mean, there's not many often. It's rare that a good team is firing their coach. We've seen good teams lose a coach, but not usually fire a coach. So it's almost always a bad team. In this case, it's one of the worst teams in the league. So you're already going to get them at the bottom of what their value is, because they just got killed by the Cowboys, and they actually, I was on the Panthers last week. They lose by a touchdown in a game that was very even, in my opinion. And even if you go back to the stats, it was a pretty even game. I mean, the Panthers had their chances, just couldn't get it done and lose a game by 1 score. Bryce Young might play a little bit better here. Who knows if Reich was holding him down a little bit in terms of not being able to put him in a situation to succeed. It's very possible that was the case. And the Bucs, they're bad, and they have a bad defense, and their defense has been banged up. They just got torched last week by Gardner Minshew and the Colts. So to think that the Panthers can't drum up some offense here, I think would be naive to think that the Panthers can't move the ball. And if the Panthers move the ball, what's there to say? I mean, there's not a ton separating these two teams, in my opinion. The only way that the Panthers are this many points worse than the Bucs is if you just render their offense completely inept, which at times it has been with Bryce Young under center. But I think it's offset by how poor this Bucs team is defensively. So I like the points here. I'll be adding stuff to my NFL card later. I would not be shocked if this ends up on it. Man, I don't know if I want to go. I don't know if I would want to be on the Bucs. Let's put it that way. Doesn't seem like a good spot for Tampa Bay. They still have a banged up defense. It's a defense that's not very good, and they're just not a very good football team. I'm not sure I would want my survivor livelihood on the Bucs, coming into this week.
One more here, Trig, just because it's an interesting game. It's going to be a fun game to watch, and probably one of the more better games on the schedule this week. Denver at Houston. Texans laying 3.5. Texas coming off a loss to the Jaguars, which would have given them first place in the division. And oh, by the way, I was on the Texans last week. It was the one game I got wrong, and I don't think I was the wrong side at all. I still think the Texans were the better team in that game. And if the refs hadn't decided to throw little yellow hankies all over the damn field, I think the Jaguars win that game. But that kind of what happened in the NFL. Broncos get a big win at home against Cleveland here. I have a hard time laying 3.5 with Houston. And oh, by the way, Denver has won 5 in a row, and Russell Wilson is quietly having one of the better seasons as a quarterback in the NFL. He's top 5 in quarterback rating, top 5 in touchdown passes, top 5 in completion percentage. And oh yeah, remember how we all talked about his career being over? It doesn't look like it. Sean Payton has slowly but surely gotten him back here. Texans defense can give up a lot of points. The Broncos defense is good, but not great. Hard game to handicap here, Trey. Do you have a feeling on which way this goes?
I would take a juiced 3 with Texans if I could find it. In my opinion, the Texans are far better. I really do believe that. I think there's some fraudulent stuff going on as far as the Broncos and their win streak. There was a game that they probably deserved to lose against Buffalo that they were kind of gifted at the end. You could make a case that they should have lost to the Vikings as well, or at least could have. And then last week they get it was a really good spot for them at home. It was just Cleveland coming out to Mile High, off of a big win of their own. So things have kind of fallen fortunate for them, I think, Mark. The Texans have just they impress pretty much every week, and even in a losing effort last week, still impressed by this team. It's a team that I have been high on since the beginning of the season. That I have 8.5 to 1 ticket on to win the AFC South, which probably won't cash, but still, I mean, they're way more in the mix than anyone could have ever anticipated. I have no problem laying the points with Houston, and like I said, I would want a juice 3 at worst, but if you can find a 3, even if it's 3 minus 120, minus 125, I think Houston's a good bet. I really do feel like they're the superior team here, getting them at home, and you're getting the Broncos coming off of multiple big wins. Now having to go on the road. So it does feel like a good spot for the Texans.
All right, make sure you guys follow us on Twitter or X, whatever it's called, at TopFlightSI. I'm at Mark Zinno. Make sure you guys hit that like button. Also, that subscribe button right here on the WagerTalk YouTube channel, and stay up to date with all the betting content that we publish here. All of our game videos that come out each and every week in college and the NFL, definitely worth taking a look at. As well, full edition of the Hustle Show podcast tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, right here on the WagerTalk YouTube channel. And make sure you guys follow the Hustle Show at Hustle Show Pod on Twitter and at Hustle Show Pod _ on Instagram as well. So for Adam Trigger, I'm Mark Zinno. Appreciate you guys watching. Good luck with your bets tonight. Go cash some tickets. We'll talk to you tomorrow and the rest of the next week. Have a great day.